Hi, thanks for joining me. Today I'd like to share with you some of my experiences with a very unique and kind of unusual hobby. Sometimes known as ROM hacking, it's also called translation hacking or just fan translation. I've been involved with this hobby for around 13 years, and in that time I've had the opportunity to work with a number of talented, interesting individuals. I'd like to share with you my personal experiences working on translation projects, but also those of other community members via interviews I conducted with some of them a handful of years ago. And this is by no means comprehensive, as I've worked with many more wonderful, talented people than I've taken the opportunity to interview, and I can't overstate the contributions they've made to my projects over the years. I'm not able to provide an overall history, but I will do my best to frame individual stories within the context of the translation scene. Let's start at romhacking.net, which is the current community hub and central repository for all ROM hacks and translation patches. Interestingly, there's something of a dual community here, comprised of ROM hackers focused more on hacking games as a form of creative self-expression, and translation hackers focused on making games playable in a language other than the original. The scene was largely formed around the latter, though ROM hacking is typically used to refer to both kinds of derivative works. Romhacking.net's wiki, known as the Data Crystal, has a handy fan translation community history section, which I'd like for us to take a look at. It starts in April 1993 with two Dutch MSX fans, Dennis, I'm going to screw this up, Lardenoy, and Ron Bolin, who formed the group Oasis to translate Japanese MSX games into English. For those who may not know, Wikipedia says that MSX is the name of a standardized home computer architecture first announced by Microsoft on June 16, 1983. It was conceived by Kazuhiko Nishi, then vice president at Microsoft Japan and director at ASCII Corporation. To provide some context, this would have been a competitor and contemporary of NEC's PC-88 and PC-98 from 1981 and 1982 respectively. For further reference, MS-DOS was first available for the IBM PC architecture in 1981. Exactly why Microsoft introduced a competing architecture in Japan only 2 years later is unclear, but also beyond the scope of this video. Suffice to say, the group Oasis worked on a number of projects for the MSX, including Snatcher, Dragon Slayer, Fray, Runemaster 3, and several Zack and Ys games. We have to jump forward a few years to 1996 before much can be said about the console ROM hacking scene. Romhacking.net states, the beginnings of fan translation of console games can be traced to a group called Kawasuku. The lead member, a hacker by the nickname Hazama, informs various people around the emulation and SNES console scenes that he's translating a ROM of Final Fantasy V. Two elements that I believe are critical to the beginnings at this time are the internet and emulation. In 1996, the internet was becoming more firmly established. However, the World Wide Web was still very young, with Microsoft's Internet Explorer released only the previous year, and Netscape Navigator only a year before that in 1994. Additionally, the video game emulation scene provided access to game code via the dumping of ROMs, the data stored on memory chips within video game cartridges, and provided the initial tools to play and debug modified ROM images. Note that the ROM software is post-compiled or machine code, and therefore working with it is a form of reverse engineering and low-level assembly programming rather than the high-level languages more commonly associated with the term programming. Of working with ROMs in the early days, my friend and fellow collaborator Espernight says, we had Nesticle for NES hacking, which showed VRAM and also the font tiles and whatnot, so we could make tables off of that. Plus, NES games aren't compressed, so that made it real easy. SNES, I'm not sure how people do that without having debuggers and whatnot. Some people are naturally insane, so can track down the stuff no probs, it seems. Well, that may not be true. You actually had hardware tools you can use, I believe. Not sure, as I didn't start that early, nor could I afford a cartridge copier. I really wanted one. The way my other friend, Bongo, puts it, when it comes to ROM hacking and the code, you're not only dealing with the machine code, but also the scripting code. It's all one big cluster of reverse engineering garbage. My job is to sift through it and find the treasure. Back to the fan translation community history at romhacking.net. After some disappointment among fans with the lack of a translation from Kawasaku, a fellow member of the emulation scene by the nickname of Demi springboards from the momentum Hazama created and reinvigorates the effort to translate Final Fantasy V. This, by most accounts, marks the formation of the first significant fan translation group, Multiple Demi-Force. However, fans would be disappointed once again when the project is abandoned in favor of a more accomplishable task, i.e., translating Final Fantasy II. He teams up with translator-at-large Some2Freak to complete the project. Now, I'm not going to go over the full history of which teams competed over which sought-after projects in the early days, but suffice to say things were interesting back then. It was before my time, but not that of some others who I work with. Wild Bill, currently the story writer and general driving force behind Dynamic Designs, who I currently work with as an official group member, got his start around 1997. According to Wild Bill, it all started with a dad who became enamored with Dragon Warrior 1, who just happened to have two grade school-aged sons who received an NES for Christmas during the late 80s. After the three of us mastered Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt, we started branching out. When one of the kids handed me the controller one day and told me he didn't know what to do with Dragon Warrior 1, then raced outside to play, over the next few hours, a monster was created. After kindling a love of Dragon Warrior, aka Dragon Quest, Wild Bill says he became obsessed with the mythical SNES Dragon Warrior 5 English prototype, said to be floating around the Los Angeles area. Constant Alta Vista searches finally landed me on the doorstep of Zophar's domain and Demi's ROM hacking board. The rest is history. For the record, he never did find that Dragon Warrior 5 prototype. He says, I honestly don't know if a prototype was produced by Enix of America. If so, to my knowledge, it never leaked out. Now, let's take this time to delve further into Wild Bill's beginnings in this hobby, as I believe they will segue well into my own. We had just moved to Hawaii, toward the middle of 1997. My children were playing sports year-round, so right away I was coaching soccer by late summer. That's when the kids all but demanded the internet. As mentioned earlier, after acquiescing, I found, met, and joined some of the other characters who were milling around in what came to be called the translation scene. My PC was a 286 with 128K of RAM, if memory serves, and a 20 megabyte hard drive. In late 1997, I replaced it with a 486 SX Packard Bell that jumped RAM into the megabyte range and hard drive capacity to 3 figures. The new machine screamed until I loaded an early version of SNES 9X, but Nesticle hummed along just fine. That's when I started hooking up with translation teams. After Task Force, Faraday, and I finished Vilgust, we got started with Phantasy Star Gaiden, Ranma, Destiny of an Emperor 2, and Talun's Great Adventure. I also helped other teams, including my small contribution to Neo Demi-Force's Final Fantasy II. I rewrote the introduction to Seiken Densetsu 3 for some 2 Freak once, but I never checked closely to see if my version was used. One fun story I wrote in 1998 was Technos' Samurai Downtown Special. On this one I teamed up with Jim Price as hacker and Faraday as translator. In hacking and story writing roles respectively, Task Force and I teamed with Gideon Z in the creation of the English patch for Monstania. We also started Lennis 2 and Mystic Arc during those early times, but we didn't release them until about a decade later, thanks to the outstanding work of several people, including, and for the record, this is largely the current lineup of Dynamic Designs members, minus myself and Rekka. Bongo, Draken, Task Force, Red Soul, and a host of outstanding translators who completed their contributions during those early years. We worked under many names during our early successes, including the Confederated Translation Center, Magic, Destiny, Ordered Chaos, the Ranma Team, Magic Destiny, Stealth, and Stealth Magic Destiny. Akujin contributed Kokoran during the founding period of Magic Destiny, our longest functioning organization to date, just as Bongo brought Just Breed and Gulliver Boy to the roster when Stealth and Magic Destiny combined to form Dynamic Designs. Just prior to our latest name change, our modern crew resuscitated Stealth's Feta and turned it into the masterpiece it is today. Filler brought Slayers aboard for a joint project with Matt's Messy Room, and together we completed work started by Chris RPG, Robert Boyd, and Filler himself. Despite our decent collection of high-quality patches produced both in-house and jointly with other groups and teams, I feel that DD has just begun to shine. And it certainly has. I think that this is a great place to leave off. Next time I hope to delve into my own history with translation hacking, and from there incorporate additional stories from ROM hackers I've collaborated with over my own long history with this crazy obsession.